Hello and welcome to another Econ Elastic video. This one again is going to be a bit of a more relaxed one. We're just going to talk about some news, and the news topic we're going to talk about today is GDP. So, if you don't know what GDP stands for, definitely recommend you check out our content. We're not going to explain that here. So, the news. What's in the news? So, US GDP, which the reason why we're talking about it, even though we're English, is America is the biggest economy in the world. And again, hopefully you know that as economic students or interested in this kind of stuff. So it affects, because it's the biggest one in the world, it affects the whole world. So when it grows, normally the world grows. When it shrinks, normally the world shrinks. So it grew in Q1 of 2021, 6.4% annualised. So it's a massive number. It's one of the biggest numbers since, I believe, Q3 of 2003, was it?
2003, yeah. So
yes.
It's a hell of a rise, isn't it? Really, from
yes.
The lows of last year. It shows obviously in the US, they've got their vaccination program up and running. In terms of the proportion of the population, it's probably not as far along as the UK one, but they've certainly got tens of millions of people now. If not over 100 million. Do you know the figure?
I'm not sure how many.
I don't know the figure. It's definitely tens of million people now vaccinated. Their economy's starting to open again. That sort of unemployment rate, which reached around 13-14% in Q2 of last year, is now fallen to around, I think, 6.5%.
So probably just slightly closer to 6, I think it is now.
Yeah, so it's still higher than it was before pre-pandemic times, but you can tell that obviously the demand for labour is coming back, and with that demand for labour, there's now an increase in prices. I think we had a look at an article that said the labour costs were the highest, or had jumped the highest in 14 years. So obviously, go on.
So all this means, what all Andrew's saying is basically that, everyone's busy and the economy is basically growing. And I think there's reading the articles, there is a slight pinch of salt, I'd say, that needs to be taken with these numbers, is that, one, they were very low. So like Andrew just mentioned, the unemployment rate, if you're going from that high of an unemployment rate, and then you get people start working back in the workforce and busy producing stuff, then the jump in percentage is always going to be, pretty big. And we're looking at stuff like the savings in the economy as well. So a couple of numbers that I think quite important to give you a backdrop of why GDP is growing or has grown. It's not growing because another sort of caveat to GDP, it's backwards looking. So this will tell you nothing of how the economy is going to be in 6 months' time. So if you're feeling very positive, then you could be completely wrong, because in 6 months' time, the economy could actually be very, very bad.
Previous quarter, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So with this in mind, we looked at the saving rates of people. Was it gross saving rate?
Just gross private savings, dollar amounts. It wasn't a saving rate. It was just literally dollar amount of savings.
So it was around circa $8 trillion in Q2 of 2020, which is an astronomical amount of money in savings.
Well, to put it in perspective, it was half that amount only a matter of a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. It was literally half that amount. That 8 trillion was in Q2 of last year. Obviously, when the economy closed down, people had nothing to spend their money on. And then you could see, like Joe said, it's backwards looking, but you could see that high did come down in Q3 2020, Q4 2020, as the economy opens up a little bit, people get more confidence, they start to spend that money. The other thing with the US, obviously, is these stimulus checks that they've been giving people. So that's $1,400 to every individual. Now, a lot of them will have saved that money when they originally got it anyway. Some people have gone out and spent it all, but as you can see, the data shows, doesn't it?
And some people would have really needed it.
Saved it.
Yeah, and some people have, would have really needed it. I think when you look at the facts and figures, unfortunately, on the news again, depending what channels you look at, a lot of things would be a lot of people are struggling, which a lot of people are struggling, but the numbers don't lie. There might have been loads of people who definitely did need that stimulus check to help make that next mortgage payment, or pay the rent, bills, or car loans. But we are saying again that savings in America have basically doubled over the last year or so, nearly, because of the pandemic. So yeah, quite a few people will have needed these checks to help them, but a lot of people have saved a lot of money as well on the other side of it. So and because of this, Andrew mentioned it's now come down in the later Qs of 2020. So it's now around about 6 trillion. So 2 trillion has been. I
think that was Q3 2020? It came down to 6 trillion.
I thought it was Q4.
Q4 2020, yeah.
Yeah. So that's now feeding in to GDP because all that money has been saved. It's going into cyclical goods. So cyclical goods means, again, another good video to watch of ours content. I'm trying to sell all our content here. To look at the business cycle. Again, the business cycle shows cyclicality. Is that right?
I don't know. That's beyond me, that word.
Cyclical. Basically, as GDP rises, as the economy's growing, people will tend to buy more luxury goods, or the goods that you don't buy if your money's tight. So your Ralph Lauren t-shirts or Burberry stuff, your Ray-Bans, your Ray-Bans. So and this is really showed in a couple of numbers. So we've looked at a couple of numbers, and in America, around 68% of the economy is made of consumers. And again, consumers, yeah, exactly. So and there's another saying that if the American consumer is tightening their belt, the economy is going to shrink, right? So, and they're not, because they've saved money. And Andrew said they've got stimulus checks, and more again entering back into the workforce. So now they've actually accelerated their spending by 10.7%. Now again, this is a group of people that makes around about 70% of the economy. A massive 10% increase. That's huge in spending power. And circa 23% of this is going on goods, so your Ray-Bans and all of that sort of stuff, and about 4.5% to 5% is going on services. So again, now economies are opening back up. You're going to restaurants and bars and stuff like that. So that makes that
4% was still an increase.
And that's an increase. Yeah,
huge hit during the pandemic, didn't they? So that is an increase, even though it's still small relative to goods. It is an increase on the last. So
this just shows you that all these sort of combinations of sort of areas have added to that GDP number over Q1. To say this continue, that might be wrong. But again, 6 trillion is still more money than we went into this pandemic that was saved. So they've still got room. The American consumer's still got room to spend more money.
The other interesting figure we saw was about imports and exports as well. Another video we've got that's worth watching is on the balance of trade. But it showed that exports had increased by, what was the number? sorry, exports have declined by 1.1%. And this is obviously shows that USA's way ahead, maybe not of the UK, but in general is ahead of the rest of the world in terms of the vaccination program and getting over the effect of COVID. The rest of the world's not. No. The rest of the world's still concentrating a lot of their resources on dealing with the pandemic. It's not worried so much about exporting goods from the USA. It's not good. It's not got the money. The consumers in Europe and the rest of the world don't have the money to be spending on US exports.
Yeah.
So that figure's actually declined, whereas US imports, which does eat away at GDP, but obviously it must have been outweighed by the consumer, the boosting consumer spending they've had, was imports increased by 5.7%. We saw on one article. So obviously this again shows, we cover this in the video. If you get more money, just more disposable income, you don't just spend more on one thing. You kind of spend more on everything.
So in our video for balance of trade, we did go into detail saying that basically someone having more money would spend it on American goods. So gross domestic products going up because of that reason.
Yeah.
But they would also buy more foreign goods. Like Andrew said, places like India that are going through a really tough time at the moment, they might actually still be making stuff, which America is
obviously China's a big
China.
A big kind of country that a lot of the Western world imports from. And they're doing quite well in their recovery. And a lot of US goods, Western goods are imported from China, aren't they?
Exactly. So they will be still importing because they're buying more. And but they'll still be spending more domestically. But it on that balance of trade, it just means at the moment America would be essentially worse off, even though the economy is growing significantly.
So that's kind of as far as we're going to go on today's video. It was just a general chat about GDP and the implications of that. Again, it's early days for us with these videos. We'll hopefully get better. You'll give us some feedback, but we're going to try, like I say, keep pumping them out sort of weekly, bi-weekly alongside our other content. So
and
we're going to add something.
So trying to plug our content. So I mean, we've mentioned the business cycle, balance of trade, and the actual gross domestic product. So if you want to know actually how it's measured and stuff, go check them free videos out.
Definitely, if you are an economics student, it's definitely worth checking out. If you're not an economics student, you might be interested.
Go check it out anyway.
Check it out anyway. We'd obviously really appreciate if you leave a like on the videos, if you comment, if you've got any questions, and if you subscribe to the channel.
Thanks for watching.
All right, see you in the next one.